The endless race for dunya is something almost every human being experiences at some point in life. From a young age, people are taught that success means having more money, a bigger house, better clothes, higher status, and constant recognition from others. Society often measures worth by what someone owns rather than who they are. Because of this mindset, many people spend their entire lives running after worldly achievements, believing that once they finally reach a certain level of wealth or status, they will feel satisfied and at peace. Yet the strange reality is that the more a person chases dunya, the faster it seems to run away. Each time one goal is achieved, another appears immediately after it, creating a cycle that never truly ends. This constant pursuit can slowly take control of the heart. When dunya becomes the main focus, a person begins to measure everything through material success. Time becomes money, relationships become transactions, and even acts of kindness can sometimes be influenced by personal gain. Without realizing it, the heart begins to attach itself to temporary things that can disappear at any moment. Wealth can be lost, status can fade, and opportunities can vanish. The problem is not that earning money or seeking success is wrong. Islam encourages effort, work, and responsibility. The real danger begins when dunya stops being a tool and instead becomes the ultimate goal of life. The endless race for dunya also creates a deep sense of anxiety. When someone believes that everything depends entirely on their own efforts, they feel constant pressure to control every outcome. They worry about losing what they have, falling behind others, or not reaching the level of success they imagined. This pressure slowly drains peace from the heart. Even when a person achieves what they were striving for, the satisfaction is often temporary. A new comparison appears, a new standard emerges, and the race continues. Many people become trapped in this cycle without ever questioning whether the finish line truly exists. Another reason this race feels endless is because dunya is designed to test the human heart. The world is full of attractions that promise happiness but rarely deliver lasting contentment. Advertisements, social expectations, and social media all amplify the feeling that everyone else is living a better life. When people constantly compare themselves to others, their desires grow larger and larger. Instead of appreciating what they have, they begin to focus only on what they lack. This mindset creates a constant sense of dissatisfaction, making the race feel even more intense. At some point, many people begin to realize that chasing dunya alone cannot bring the peace they expected. They see wealthy individuals who are still unhappy, famous people who struggle with loneliness, and successful professionals who feel empty despite their achievements. This realization becomes a turning point for the heart. It opens the door to a deeper understanding that the purpose of life cannot be limited to temporary possessions and achievements. The heart begins to search for something more meaningful, something that cannot be taken away by time or circumstances. When a believer starts reflecting on the nature of dunya, they begin to understand that it was never meant to be the final destination. It is only a temporary stage of life, a place where people are tested through both hardship and ease. Wealth, success, and comfort are not signs of ultimate victory. They are simply tools that can either bring a person closer to their Creator or distract them from their true purpose. Once this realization settles in the heart, the endless race begins to lose its grip. The believer does not stop working or striving, but their mindset changes completely. Instead of chasing dunya with desperation, they begin to see it as something secondary. Their focus shifts toward pleasing Allah, building character, and preparing for the eternal life that lies beyond this world. Interestingly, this shift often brings a surprising sense of calm. When the heart stops obsessing over every worldly outcome, the pressure begins to fade. Effort remains, but anxiety decreases because the believer understands that ultimate provision and success are already written. This new perspective transforms the relationship with dunya. Rather than running endlessly after it, the believer walks through life with balance. They work, earn, and pursue opportunities, but their heart remains detached from the illusion that dunya can fulfill every desire. They begin to value things that cannot be measured by wealth. Sincerity, faith, gratitude, patience, and closeness to Allah. These qualities bring a deeper type of satisfaction that worldly success alone cannot provide. Over time, this shift in priorities creates a powerful transformation. The person who once ran endlessly after worldly gains now experiences a different kind of peace. They no longer feel enslaved by the expectations of society or the pressure to constantly compete with others. Their heart becomes lighter because it is no longer tied to temporary achievements. Instead, it is connected to a higher purpose that gives meaning to every action and every moment of life. This is the moment when the race truly changes. Instead of Dunya controlling the heart begins to control its relationship with Dunya. The believer realizes that success is not defined by how much they accumulate, but by how well they live according to the guidance of Allah. And when this understanding becomes firm, the endless race that once dominated their life slowly fades into the background, replaced by a journey filled with purpose, trust, and spiritual clarity. Why chasing everything leaves you empty is deeply connected to the nature of the human heart. Human beings were not created to be satisfied by temporary things alone. The heart was designed to seek something eternal, something stable, something greater than the constantly changing world. When a person tries to fill that spiritual space with wealth, fame, or possessions, it creates a gap that can never truly be filled. No matter how much someone accumulates, the heart continues searching for something more. Many people assume that emptiness only affects those who struggle financially or face obvious hardships. In reality, some of the most successful individuals in the world openly admit that they feel a sense of emptiness despite having everything they once dreamed of. This feeling often appears after years of chasing goals that promised happiness but delivered only temporary excitement. The excitement fades quickly, leaving behind the same questions that were there before. Is this all there is? Why do I still feel unsatisfied? One of the reasons chasing everything leads to emptiness is because the human mind constantly adapts to new circumstances. Psychologically, when a person achieves a goal, their level of happiness increases for a short period of time. Soon after, the mind returns to its normal state and begins looking for the next target. This process repeats again and again. As a result, the person feels like they must keep achieving more and more just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. Instead of creating peace, this endless cycle increases pressure and exhaustion. Another factor that contributes to emptiness is the loss of deeper meaning. When life becomes focused only on personal gain, it can gradually lose its spiritual and emotional depth. Relationships may become weaker because time and attention are constantly directed toward work or financial goals. Acts of kindness may decrease because they do not directly contribute to personal success. Slowly, the heart becomes disconnected from the things that bring genuine fulfillment, such as compassion, gratitude, and service to others. The pursuit of everything also creates unrealistic expectations. When someone believes that happiness lies in achieving a certain lifestyle or level of success, they build a mental image of how perfect their life will feel once they reach it. However, real life rarely matches these expectations. Challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties still exist even after success is achieved. When reality fails to match the imagined outcome, the person feels confused and disappointed, wondering why the happiness they expected never fully arrived. This emptiness often becomes most visible during quiet moments. When the noise of daily activity fades, the heart begins to reflect on deeper questions about purpose and meaning. A person may realize that despite all their efforts, they feel disconnected from their spiritual identity. They may recognize that they spent years building their worldly life but neglected the development of their inner self. These moments of reflection can be uncomfortable, but they also hold the potential for transformation. For many believers, this realization becomes the beginning of a spiritual awakening. They start to understand that the emptiness they feel is not a failure, but a signal. It is a reminder that the heart needs more than temporary achievements. It needs a connection with the Creator, a sense of purpose beyond material success, and a life guided by values that bring lasting peace. When a person turns toward Allah with sincerity, they often discover that the emptiness begins to fade. This does not mean that worldly goals become meaningless. Instead, they are placed in their proper position. Work, wealth, and success become tools rather than sources of identity. The believer understands that true fulfillment comes from aligning their life with the purpose for which they were created. When actions are guided by faith and intention, even ordinary tasks gain deeper meaning. Providing for family, helping others, seeking knowledge, and practicing gratitude all become acts of worship that nourish the heart. Gradually, the person who once felt empty begins to experience a different kind of satisfaction. It is quieter and more stable than the excitement of worldly achievements. It does not depend on constant success or recognition. Instead, it grows from the awareness that life is connected to a greater purpose and that every effort made for the sake of Allah carries lasting value. In this way, the emptiness caused by chasing everything is replaced by a sense of completeness that comes from focusing on what truly matters. The illusion of control over rizq is one of the most common misunderstandings people have about life. Many individuals believe that their income, opportunities, and financial security depend entirely on their intelligence, hard work, and planning. While effort is certainly important and encouraged, believing that everything is controlled purely by human effort creates a heavy burden on the heart. People begin to think that if they just work harder, plan better, or push themselves more, they can guarantee the outcome they desire. This belief slowly forms the illusion that they are the true controllers of their provision. In reality, the concept of rizq is far deeper and more complex than human calculations. Rizq is not limited to money or wealth. It includes health, peace of mind, relationships, knowledge, opportunities, and even the ability to breathe each moment. From the moment a person enters this world, their provision has already been written. This does not mean that effort is meaningless, but it reminds the believer that effort is only a means, not the ultimate source of results. The true source of provision is Allah, who distributes it according to wisdom that often goes beyond human understanding. When people believe they control their rizq completely, they begin to live with constant stress. They fear losing their job, missing opportunities, or falling behind others. Every small setback feels like a personal failure. They worry about the future so intensely that they forget to appreciate the blessings they already have. This mindset transforms work from a healthy responsibility into a constant source of anxiety. Instead of feeling grateful for the chance to earn and grow, the person feels trapped in an endless struggle to secure what they believe depends entirely on them. However, life repeatedly shows that human control is limited. Two people may work equally hard, yet their outcomes can be completely different. Someone may plan carefully for years only to see their plans suddenly change. Another person might receive unexpected opportunities without chasing them aggressively. These moments reveal a deeper reality. While human beings can strive and plan, the final outcome always lies beyond their control. Recognizing this truth is not meant to discourage effort, but rather to free the heart from unnecessary pressure. Understanding the illusion of control allows a believer to develop a healthier relationship with work and success. They continue to strive, but their heart remains calm because they trust that what is meant for them will reach them. Instead of exhausting themselves with constant fear about the future, they focus on doing their best while leaving the results in the hands of Allah. This mindset creates balance. Effort remains strong, but anxiety weakens because the person understands that their provision cannot be taken away by someone else's success or delayed beyond what is written for them. This realization also encourages gratitude. When a person understands that rizq is not purely the result of their own abilities, they become more humble and thankful for every blessing. They see their income, health, and opportunities not as personal achievements alone, but as gifts entrusted to them. This perspective softens the heart and strengthens faith, reminding the believer that every blessing carries a responsibility to use it wisely and ethically. Over time, the illusion of control begins to fade. The believer learns to walk a path of effort combined with trust. They plan, work, and strive with sincerity, but their peace does not depend on controlling every outcome. Instead, they rely on the certainty that the one who controls all provision is also the one who knows their needs better than they know themselves. This understanding transforms daily life into a journey of trust rather than a constant battle for control. When Dunya becomes your master, the balance of life begins to shift in a dangerous direction. The world itself is not the problem. It was created as a place for human beings to live, work, and fulfill their responsibilities. The problem begins when the heart becomes completely attached to dunya and allows it to define its value, purpose, and happiness. Instead of being a tool that helps a person live a meaningful life, dunya becomes the center around which everything else revolves. When this happens, priorities slowly change. Decisions are no longer guided by values or long-term purpose, but by immediate gain and personal advantage. A person may begin choosing opportunities that increase their wealth, even if those choices distance them from their faith, family, or moral principles. Over time, the desire to maintain status or financial comfort becomes so strong that the individual feels unable to step away from the system they have built around themselves. In this way, dunya quietly takes control of the heart. One of the signs that dunya has become a master is when a person's emotional state becomes completely tied to worldly circumstances. If they gain wealth or recognition, they feel powerful and confident. If they experience loss or criticism, they feel crushed and hopeless. Their sense of worth rises and falls depending on external factors that are constantly changing. This emotional instability reveals that the heart has placed too much importance on things that were never meant to provide lasting security. Another consequence of making dunya the master is the loss of inner freedom. A person may appear successful on the outside, but internally they feel trapped by the very lifestyle they worked so hard to build. They fear losing their position, disappointing others, or falling behind in the competitive race around them. Instead of feeling grateful for their achievements, they feel pressured to constantly maintain and expand them. This pressure gradually drains joy from their accomplishments. Relationships can also suffer when dunya dominates the heart. When material success becomes the highest priority, time and attention are often redirected away from meaningful connections. Family moments may be sacrificed for work, friendships may weaken due to lack of presence, and acts of kindness may become secondary to personal ambition. Slowly, the person realizes that while they gained more possessions, they may have lost some of the emotional and spiritual richness that makes life fulfilling. Another subtle effect occurs within the soul itself. When the heart becomes overly attached to dunya, spiritual awareness begins to weaken. Acts of worship may feel rushed or mechanical because the mind is constantly occupied with business, money, or social status. Reflection becomes rare because life moves at a pace that leaves little room for silence or contemplation. The heart begins to feel heavy, even if the person cannot immediately explain why. Yet the nature of dunya itself contains a lesson. No matter how powerful someone becomes or how much they accumulate, the world constantly reminds them that nothing lasts forever. Wealth can disappear through unexpected circumstances, health can change suddenly, and positions of influence can shift. These reminders serve as gentle warnings, encouraging the believer to reconsider the role that dunya plays in their life. When a person recognizes that dunya has become their master, they are given an opportunity to restore balance. Instead of abandoning worldly responsibilities, they learn to reposition them. Work remains important, but it no longer defines the entire identity of the person. Wealth becomes a tool for supporting family, helping others, and fulfilling responsibilities rather than a symbol of personal worth. This shift in perspective returns freedom to the heart. The believer begins to see dunya as something temporary that must be handled wisely, but never allowed to dominate the soul. They continue to strive for excellence in their work and responsibilities, but their ultimate loyalty belongs to something greater than worldly success. Their purpose becomes aligned with pleasing Allah rather than impressing society. As this balance strengthens, the relationship with dunya changes completely. The person who once felt controlled by material pursuits begins to experience a new sense of calm. They understand that wealth, status, and opportunities are temporary trusts rather than permanent possessions. Because their heart is no longer enslaved by them, they can use these blessings with wisdom and gratitude. In this state, dunya returns to its proper role. It becomes a path through which a believer can practice generosity, patience, responsibility, and faith. Instead of being a master that demands constant sacrifice, it becomes a servant that helps the believer fulfill their purpose. And when the heart is no longer controlled by dunya, it becomes capable of experiencing a deeper kind of peace that worldly success alone could never provide. The hidden cost of material obsession is something that often goes unnoticed in the early stages of a person's pursuit of success. At first, the desire to improve one's financial condition or lifestyle may seem completely reasonable. People work harder, pursue better opportunities, and strive to provide a comfortable life for themselves and their families. However, when the pursuit of material gain becomes excessive, it slowly begins to affect the heart, the mind, and even relationships in ways that are not immediately visible. Material obsession usually begins with a simple comparison. A person sees what others have and starts to believe that they must achieve the same or even more in order to feel fulfilled. Social expectations, advertisements, and constant exposure to the lifestyles of others reinforce the idea that happiness lies in owning more. Over time, these comparisons grow stronger, and the desire for possession slowly transforms into a deeper attachment. The person no longer wants things simply for their usefulness. They begin to see them as symbols of success, identity, and personal worth. As this attachment grows, the hidden costs begin to appear. One of the first effects is the gradual loss of contentment. Instead of appreciating what they already have, a person constantly focuses on what they still lack. Even when they achieve something they once desired, the satisfaction quickly fades because a new desire takes its place. This cycle can continue indefinitely, creating a mindset where nothing ever feels truly sufficient. The heart becomes restless, always searching for the next improvement or upgrade that promises happiness. Another hidden cost is the amount of time and energy consumed by this obsession. A person may spend countless hours thinking about ways to earn more, invest more, or expand their possession. While ambition itself is not wrong, the problem arises when it begins to dominate every aspect of life. Moments that could have been spent strengthening family bonds, reflecting on spiritual growth, or simply enjoying the blessings of the present are replaced by constant planning and worry about material goals. Relationships often suffer quietly under the weight of material obsession. When success becomes the primary focus, people may unintentionally neglect those closest to them. They may justify long absences, emotional distance, or lack of attention by believing that their hard work is ultimately for the benefit of their loved ones. However, over time, family members may feel that they are competing with work, wealth, or ambition for attention and care. The emotional connection that once brought warmth to the household can weaken as priorities shift. Material obsession can also affect a person's sense of ethics and moral boundaries. When wealth becomes the ultimate measure of success, some individuals begin to rationalize decisions that they would have once avoided. They may compromise honesty, fairness, or compassion in order to gain an advantage. What once seemed unacceptable gradually becomes easier to justify if it leads to financial benefit. In this way, the pursuit of wealth can slowly reshape the moral compass of a person who is not careful to guard their values. Another cost that often remains hidden is the internal pressure created by the desire to maintain a certain lifestyle. Once a person becomes accustomed to a higher level of spending or social status, they may feel trapped by the need to sustain it. Instead of enjoying the fruits of their labor, they feel anxious about losing what they have built. This anxiety can lead to constant stress, long working hours, and an inability to rest mentally even during moments that should bring peace. Perhaps the most significant hidden cost is the gradual distancing of the heart from spiritual awareness. When the mind is constantly occupied with financial targets, possessions, and worldly ambitions, it becomes harder to focus on deeper reflection. Acts of worship may still be performed, but they may feel rushed or distracted because the mind remains tied to worldly concerns. Over time, this weakens the connection between the individual and their creator, leaving a quiet emptiness that material success cannot fill. Despite these challenges, the realization of these hidden costs can become a turning point. When a person begins to recognize that material obsession is draining their peace rather than enhancing it, they gain the opportunity to restore balance in their life. They start to see wealth and possessions not as the ultimate goal, but as tools that should serve a greater purpose. With this new understanding, the heart gradually becomes lighter, less burdened by comparison and endless desire. By shifting the focus toward gratitude and purposeful living, a person can reclaim the joy that was once overshadowed by material ambition. They still work, earn, and strive, but their identity is no longer defined by what they own. Instead, they measure success by the quality of their character, their service to others, and their closeness to Allah. In this way, the hidden cost of material obsession becomes a lesson that guides the believer toward a more balanced and meaningful life. The warning about loving dunya too much appears repeatedly in the Quran because of the powerful influence the world can have on the human heart. Dunya itself is not evil. It is a creation designed to support life and provide opportunities for growth and testing. However, when love for dunya becomes excessive, it begins to compete with the love of Allah and the awareness of the hereafter. This competition within the heart is what the Quran cautions believers about. Loving dunya too much often begins with small attachments that slowly grow stronger over time. A person may become deeply attached to wealth, comfort, status, or recognition. These attachments may initially seem harmless, but they can gradually take priority over spiritual obligations and moral responsibilities. When the heart becomes overly attached to worldly things, the fear of losing them begins to shape decisions and behaviors. One of the dangers highlighted in the Quran is how easily worldly attractions can distract people from their true purpose. The world offers countless forms of entertainment, ambition, and competition that can occupy a person's attention entirely. Without careful reflection, a person may become so focused on improving their worldly situation that they forget to prepare for the life that comes after death. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers that this life is temporary and that the hereafter is the lasting reality. Excessive love for dunya also creates a distorted sense of priorities. A person may begin to value wealth more than integrity, status more than humility, and comfort more than faithfulness. These shifting priorities can lead individuals to compromise important principles in order to maintain their worldly advantages. When this happens, the heart becomes gradually hardened, making it more difficult to recognize spiritual truths and moral responsibilities. Another warning found in the Quran is that dunya can deceive people by appearing more important than it truly is. The beauty, luxury, and opportunities of the world can create the illusion that they are permanent sources of happiness. Yet history repeatedly shows that worldly power and wealth do not last forever. Civilizations rise and fall, fortunes appear and disappear, and even the most influential individuals eventually leave this world behind. The Quran uses these reminders to encourage believers to keep a balanced perspective. The danger of loving dunya too much is not limited to wealth alone. It can also appear in the form of pride, competition, or the desire for recognition. A person may become overly concerned with how others perceive them, constantly seeking approval or admiration. This desire for validation can slowly replace sincerity in actions, turning good deeds into opportunities for social recognition rather than acts of devotion. However, the Quran's warnings are not meant to discourage believers from participating in worldly life. Islam encourages work, trade, family life, and social responsibility. The key message is balance. Believers are reminded to benefit from the blessings of dunya while keeping their hearts connected to the greater purpose of pleasing Allah. When this balance is maintained, dunya becomes a path for earning reward rather than a distraction from faith. One of the most powerful solutions offered in the Quran is the constant remembrance of the temporary nature of life. When a person regularly reflects on the reality that this world will eventually end, their perspective begins to change. They become less attached to temporary gains and more focused on actions that carry lasting value. This awareness encourages humility, generosity, and patience in the face of both success and hardship. Another important lesson is the emphasis on gratitude. When a believer recognizes that every blessing in dunya is a gift from Allah, their relationship with worldly possessions becomes healthier. Instead of becoming proud or overly attached, they feel responsible for using these blessings wisely. Wealth becomes a means to help others, comfort becomes an opportunity to show gratitude, and success becomes a chance to increase humility rather than arrogance. Through these reminders, the Quran guides believers toward a balanced life where dunya serves its proper purpose. The world remains a place of effort, responsibility, and opportunity, but it never becomes the ultimate destination of the heart. By keeping their focus on the eternal reality of the hereafter, believers protect themselves from the dangers of excessive attachment and ensure that their journey through this temporary life remains guided by faith and wisdom.